We often consider our modern justice systems, with their emphasis on rehabilitation, due process, and human rights, to be the pinnacle of societal progress. We look back and imagine a linear path from chaos to order, from barbarism to enlightenment. But history, as it so often does, presents a far more complex and unsettling picture. For millennia, societies grappled with crime and punishment, experimenting with methods that, to our contemporary minds, sound not just severe, but utterly insane. These weren't isolated incidents of cruelty. These were established, often legally codified, practices designed to maintain social order, exact retribution, and deter future transgressions. When we delve into the annals of history, we uncover a profound disconnect in how humanity has defined justice, suffering, and the very concept of human dignity. What was once seen as a necessary, even divinely sanctioned, means of upholding law and order now stands as a testament to the darker capacities of human invention. We're talking about forms of punishment so visceral, so prolonged, and so unimaginably cruel that they make even our most severe contemporary penalties seem almost gentle by comparison. These aren't just stories, they're stark reminders of how thin the veneer of civility can sometimes be, and how drastically our moral compass has, thankfully, shifted. Consider for a moment the sheer ingenuity applied to inflicting pain and humiliation. It wasn't merely about ending a life quickly. It was often about maximizing torment, making an example, and projecting power through public spectacle. These punishments weren't hidden away. They were often public events, theatrical displays meant to etch fear into the collective consciousness of a community. They served multiple purposes: retribution for the victim and their family, a stark warning to potential offenders, and a reaffirmation of the state's absolute authority. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? That human beings could, with such meticulous detail, devise such agonizing ends for their fellow humans. Today, we're going to pull back that veil of time and examine 4 forms of punishment that truly sound insane to us now. We'll explore their grim mechanics, their historical context, and why they were considered legitimate tools of justice. By understanding these practices, we gain a deeper appreciation for the evolution of our own legal and ethical frameworks, and perhaps a renewed commitment to the principles of humaneness that we often take for granted. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will challenge your understanding of justice and perhaps humanity itself. One of the most horrifying methods of execution, particularly infamous in ancient Persia, was something called Scaphism, sometimes referred to as the boats. This punishment was a truly agonizing ordeal, designed for prolonged suffering and a slow, gruesome death. Imagine this. The condemned individual would be stripped naked and placed between 2 hollowed-out logs or small boats, which were then fastened together. Their head, hands, and feet would protrude, while the rest of their body remained enclosed within the confined space. It was, in essence, a human sandwich, but the horror had only just begun. The victim was then force-fed a mixture of milk and honey, often to the point of severe nausea and diarrhea. This concoction was also smeared lavishly all over their face and exposed limbs. Next, the boats and the person trapped within them would be left to float in a stagnant body of water, exposed to the elements. The combination of the milk and honey, along with the inevitable accumulation of excrement within the enclosed space, created an irresistible attractant for insects and other vermin. Flies, wasps, and bees would swarm the victim's face, stinging and biting. More insidiously, maggots and other parasitic creatures would begin to breed in the victim's festering flesh and bodily waste, slowly devouring them, both from the outside and, horrifyingly, from the inside. The torturers weren't done, though. To prolong the torment, the victim would be force-fed the milk and honey daily, ensuring they remained alive, hydrated, and continued to produce the waste that attracted their tormentors. Death, when it finally came, was a protracted misery, often taking days or even weeks from dehydration, malnutrition, infection, septic shock, and the incessant, unimaginable pain of being eaten alive. Scaphism was not just a method of execution. It was a diabolical orchestration of prolonged suffering, designed to maximize physical and psychological torment. It's a chilling example of human cruelty, meant to instill absolute terror and maintain social order through fear. Moving to a different era and region, we encounter the breaking wheel. Also known as the Catherine wheel. This device was a public execution method used primarily in Europe from antiquity through the Middle Ages, right up to the 19th century. It symbolized a justice system built on ritual, hierarchy, and fear. The breaking wheel was a large wooden or metal wheel, with spokes resembling a wagon wheel. There were several methods of execution using this device. In some instances, the condemned person would be tied to the wheel, often spread-eagled, with their limbs stretched out along the spokes over sturdy wooden beams. The executioner would then use a heavy hammer or an iron bar to systematically break the victim's bones, typically starting with the limbs. This process was excruciatingly painful, with the victim being struck repeatedly until their bones were shattered, leading to a slow and agonizing death. Another gruesome variation involved weaving the criminal through the spokes of the wheel, ensuring maximum exposure and humiliation. Sometimes, instead of breaking bones, the wheel itself would be rolled over the victim's body, crushing them and causing severe internal injuries. The suffering was often prolonged, and the ultimate goal was not merely death, but a public spectacle that inflicted maximum pain and degradation. In the Holy Roman Empire, the breaking wheel was typically reserved for aggravated murder or other particularly heinous crimes. After the execution, the body was often left on the wheel, displayed in public view, sometimes on a pole or scaffold, as a grim warning to others. This post-mortem display also had a sacral function, according to beliefs at the time. Leaving the body exposed to scavengers and decay would hinder the transition from death to resurrection. It was a punishment designed to break not only the body, but also the spirit, and to ensure that the memory of the crime and its brutal consequences lingered long after the victim's last breath. The breaking wheel was abolished in Bavaria in 1813 and in Hesse in 1836, with the last known execution in Prussia in 1841. Our journey into historical punishments now brings us to the rack a notorious torture device used across medieval Europe and beyond, dating back to ancient Greece. This apparatus was primarily an interrogation tool, designed to extract confessions or information, rather than a direct method of execution, though death certainly resulted. The rack consisted of a rectangular, usually wooden frame, slightly raised from the ground, with a roller at one or both ends. The victim's ankles were securely fastened to one roller, and their wrists chained to the other. As the interrogation progressed, a handle and ratchet mechanism attached to a roller would be used to very gradually retract the chains, slowly increasing the strain on the prisoner's shoulders, hips, knees, and elbows. With each turn of the crank, the victim's limbs were stretched in opposite directions. This relentless tension caused excruciating pain as joints were pulled apart, leading to dislocations, tearing of muscles and ligaments, and, in severe cases, even the breaking of bones. The sounds of bones and ligaments snapping were often described as startlingly clear. Sometimes heavy weights were added to the victim's body to intensify the agony. The rack wasn't just about physical pain, it was a psychological nightmare, with the victim fully aware of what was happening to their body, a deliberate and methodical dismantling of their physical integrity. The rack was employed by various authorities, including the Spanish Inquisition and in England, against those accused of treason or religious heresy, to try and force them to confess and name supposed conspirators. Famous historical figures, such as Guy Fawkes and Anne Askew, are believed to have endured the rack. In Russia, a form of the rack involved suspending victims from a gallows-like device, where they would also be whipped and sometimes burned. While the rack was an instrument of immense suffering, skilled torturers reportedly used it to instill such fear that victims would confess quickly, even before the full extent of the physical torment was applied. Its use was eventually abolished in many Western countries in the 18th and 19th centuries, though its legacy as a symbol of brutal interrogation remains. Finally, we turn to a method of torture that exploits one of our most primal fears: rat torture, This horrifying practice has been documented across various cultures and periods, utilizing rats to inflict unspeakable pain, and often a drawn-out, agonizing death. The most common method involved restraining a victim, usually lying flat on the surface. A metal cage, pot, or pottery bowl containing live rats, often starved, would then be placed open side down on a sensitive part of their body, typically the abdomen. Heat, such as hot charcoal, would then be applied to the outside of the container. The rats, desperate to escape the scorching heat, would instinctively burrow for a way out. The only available escape route was downward, through the victim's flesh. With single-minded purpose, the rats would dig their claws and teeth into the victim's soft belly, slowly eating their way through the outer flesh and into their internal organs. The victim would experience unimaginable pain, screaming and writhing as their body was ripped apart from the inside. Other variations of rat torture existed. In some cases, the rats were placed in baggy pants tied around a prisoner's ankles. Another gruesome alternative involved cutting the victim open and placing rats directly inside, saving the rats the initial work. There are also accounts of cages of rats being placed over a victim's face, allowing them to gnaw at the nose, ears, and mouth. Historically, rat torture was used during conflicts like the Dutch Revolt, where Diederik Sonoy reportedly used it to extract information from prisoners. Sadly, this barbaric method was not confined to ancient or medieval times. It was reportedly employed by several South American military dictatorships in the 20th century, with harrowing accounts of rats being inserted into victims' rectums or vaginas. The sheer psychological horror, combined with the physical agony of being eaten alive from the inside out, makes rat torture one of the most viscerally disturbing punishments ever conceived. These four forms of punishment, Scaphism, the breaking wheel, the rack, and rat torture, offer us a grim window into the historical landscape of justice and social control. They remind us that the evolution of punishment is not a linear march toward inherent goodness, but a complex interplay of societal values, political power, and our evolving understanding of human rights. From the slow, insect-borne decomposition of Scaphism, a torture that stretched suffering to its absolute limits, to the bone-shattering public spectacle of the breaking wheel, designed to terrify and degrade, to the systematic joint dislocation of the rack, an interrogation tool of relentless torment, and finally, to the visceral, internal horror of rat torture, which preyed on our deepest fears of being consumed alive. Each method reflects a time when the boundaries of human cruelty were starkly different from our own. These practices, as horrific as they are, serve a crucial purpose in our historical understanding. They underscore the transformative power of empathy and the gradual, often hard-won, development of legal and ethical frameworks that prioritize human dignity. While elements of social control and deterrence remain in modern justice systems, the sheer barbarity and intentional prolongation of suffering seen in these historical punishments are, thankfully, largely relegated to the past. Yet, by looking back at these insane punishments, we're not just observing distant atrocities. We're engaging with a fundamental question: what does it mean to be human? And how do we ensure that our pursuit of justice never again descends into such profound inhumanity? The lessons of history, particularly the darkest ones, are not there to frighten us, but to guide us, to ensure that as societies evolve, our commitment to humane treatment, even for those who commit the most egregious acts, continues to grow, unwavering. We have come a long way, but the vigilance required to maintain those hard-won principles remains as vital as ever.